Kids tell the truth with their feet long before adults admit it with their mouths. At exactly 4:17 on a rainy Thursday afternoon, my 7-year-old granddaughter abandoned a shopping cart full of Capri Suns and frozen waffles in aisle 7 of the Ingalls Market on Tunnel Road and ran straight into my arms like she'd been lost for years. "Grandpa," she whispered against my jacket, holding on so tight my old shoulder popped. "I thought you forgot me." 18 days later, a Buncombe County judge froze a trust account worth $184,000 because of that hug. But stay with me here. Because the woman who yanked Sophie away from me without saying a single word had no idea an old CPS investigator in a faded denim jacket had already started noticing things she should have hidden better. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to know something. Where are you watching from tonight? And what time is it where you are? I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy real family stories like this, the messy kind with heartbreak, quiet revenge, and second chances, go ahead and subscribe. We've got plenty more to talk about. I live in a small one-story brick house off Brevard Road in Asheville, North Carolina. Nothing fancy. Brown shutters. Wind chimes my late wife insisted were tasteful, even though they sound like a spoon fight during thunderstorms. A cracked concrete driveway with exactly one oil stain I've been pretending to fix since 2019. I drive a blue and silver 2008 Ford F-150 with 247,000 miles on it. The driver's side window only rolls down if you slap the door panel first. Don't judge me. That truck has survived 2 cross-state moves, 1 black bear incident, and a grandchild armed with strawberry yogurt. I'm 68 years old, retired, and according to my friend Walt Jenkins, one minor inconvenience away from becoming a hardware store greeter. That's not true, mostly because I'd never wear the apron. Now, before all this happened, my life was small, in the kind of way older folks don't always admit out loud. Quiet mornings. Maxwell House coffee at 5:45 a.m. Local news humming from the kitchen television, while I watered tomato plants that never quite listened to me. Wednesdays at the VA clinic. Fridays eating pulled pork with Walt at Little Pig's BBQ on McDowell Street. And Sophie. Everything in my week revolved around Sophie. My granddaughter was 7 years old when this story happened. Skinny little thing with tangled brown curls and a habit of asking questions nobody was emotionally prepared for. "Pop Pop," she once asked me, while dipping fries into a chocolate milkshake at Cookout, "turtles wear shells. Do worms feel naked?" That child could derail an adult brain in under 6 seconds. She called me Pop Pop because she said Grandpa sounded like a man who complains about soup. Fair enough. Every Saturday, before things fell apart, Sophie and I had pancake mornings. Chocolate chip pancakes. Real maple syrup only. None of that breakfast-flavored glue in plastic bottles. At 8:15 sharp, Ethan would pull into my driveway in his gray Chevy Silverado, Sophie bouncing in the back seat like she'd consumed military-grade sugar. My son Ethan Myers was 41 when he died. Still feels strange saying that sentence out loud. You never really learn how to place grief correctly. People tell you time helps, but honestly, time mostly teaches you how to carry weight without making noises every time you stand up. Ethan worked as an electrical systems engineer for Duke Energy. Smart kid, quiet like me, the kind of man who listened completely before speaking, which made him unusually dangerous during arguments, because by the time he finally talked, he was right. Claire used to joke that living with two Myers men was like sharing a house with emotionally constipated Labradors. That was before everything changed. Now listen, I need you to understand something here. Claire Bennett Myers was not some cartoon villain twirling her mustache over railroad tracks. Life's rarely that simple. Before Ethan died, Claire was actually pretty decent to be around. Organized, sharp, could decorate a living room like she was hosting an HGTV ambush. She managed a dental office downtown and carried one of those giant Stanley cups around like it contained the secrets of the universe. She loved Sophie. I believe that even now. But grief changes people differently. Some people collapse inward. Some get angry. Some become terrified of losing control ever again. Claire became controlling in quiet little pieces at first. That's what makes manipulation dangerous. Nobody announces it like a halftime show. After Ethan's funeral, she started canceling visits. At first, the excuses made sense. Sophie's tired. She's overwhelmed. She caught a cold at school. Maybe next weekend. And because I'd spent nearly 30 years working child welfare investigations for Buncombe County CPS, I knew better than to push too hard too early. Families in grief need space sometimes. God knows I wasn't exactly functioning normally myself. My wife Linda had already been gone 4 years by then. Pancreatic cancer. Quick and ugly. You want to know real loneliness? It's reaching for somebody in the dark because your brain still thinks they're there. That first year after Ethan died, I caught myself almost calling him 3 different times because I heard a strange engine noise in the truck, and he was always better with diagnostics than me. You learn grief lives in habits more than tears. Anyway, the real shift with Claire happened around month 6. Small things. She stopped answering calls directly. Only texts. Then shorter texts. Then no responses for days. One time I drove 23 minutes across town with Sophie's birthday present. A purple Schwinn bicycle with glitter streamers on the handlebars, only to find nobody home, even though Claire had confirmed the visit the night before. I sat in that truck holding the receipt from Walmart for 40 minutes like an idiot. You know that feeling when you realize you're being slowly edited out of somebody's life? It doesn't happen with explosions. It happens with silence. Walt noticed before I admitted it. Walt Jenkins is 71 years old and looks like a retired baseball coach who got banned from 3 casinos for attitude reasons. We've been friends since 1982. He showed up one Sunday afternoon while I was attempting to smoke ribs in my backyard. Attempting, important distinction. "Parker," he said, staring at the smoker, pouring black smoke into the Carolina sky. "I've seen apartment fires with less commitment." "It's called bark," I told him. "It's called arson. That man has never missed an opportunity to insult me with affection." We sat outside in plastic lawn chairs while cicadas screamed from the trees and summer humidity wrapped around us like a wet blanket. "You seen Sophie lately?" he asked casually. I took too long answering. That's all Walt needed. He looked at me over the top of a sweating glass of sweet tea. She's icing you out, I shrugged like the answer didn't matter. Claire's just busy. Mm-hmm. That mm-hmm carried 40 years of friendship and exactly zero belief. She's grieving too, I said. She is, Walt agreed. But grieving and isolating ain't always the same thing. That sentence sat with me longer than I wanted, because deep down part of me already knew something felt wrong. Not loud wrong, quiet wrong. The kind you feel in your chest before your brain catches up. Then came the Thursday afternoon at Ingalls Market on Tunnel Road, rain tapping the windows, shopping carts rattling over wet pavement, and my granddaughter running toward me like she'd finally found oxygen after being underwater too long. You can learn a lot about a family in a grocery store. No, seriously. People think truth shows up during dramatic speeches or courtroom confessions, but half the important things I learned in 30 years working CPS happened under fluorescent lights near frozen vegetables. You notice who walks ahead, who apologizes too fast, who flinches, who keeps looking for permission before speaking. That Thursday, Asheville had one of those cold spring rains that turns every parking lot into a gray mirror. The kind where windshield wipers sound tired. I remember because my left knee was acting up, which always happens when the weather gets dramatic. I pulled into the Ingalls Market on Tunnel Road around 4:05 p.m. after spending 20 minutes arguing with a cashier at AutoZone about windshield fluid that absolutely did not deserve to cost $14.99. $14.99 for blue water. America has lost its mind. Anyway, I grabbed one of those shopping carts with the crooked wheel that sounds like it's carrying unresolved trauma and headed inside. The automatic doors opened with that little hydraulic sigh, and the smell hit me immediately. Coffee, bakery bread, rainwater, and fried chicken from the deli section. If heaven exists, there's probably a southern grandmother near the entrance handing out free samples. I wasn't shopping for anything exciting. Folger's coffee, oatmeal cookies, dog food for Walt's Labrador because he'd thrown his back out trying to move a riding mower and claimed bending over was now government oppression. I also needed paper towels because old men somehow spill everything. The store was busy in that normal weekday way. Moms steering carts one-handed while scrolling phones. High school kids in red Ingalls aprons pretending not to hate existence. Country music playing softly overhead. I was near aisle 7 comparing two different brands of canned chili when I heard sneakers slapping tile behind me. Fast. Then a voice. Pop, pop. I turned just in time to see Sophie sprinting toward me. Now listen carefully to this next part. Kids don't fake urgency well. Adults do. Kids don't. Sophie hit me like a linebacker in light-up Skechers, arms around my waist, face pressed into my denim jacket, holding on hard. Too hard. Not playful hard. Scared hard. I nearly lost my balance and grabbed the cart handle with one hand while she squeezed tighter. Whoa there, Peanut! I laughed automatically, though something inside me had already gone cold. You trying to break an old man in half? And then she said it, quietly. So quietly, I almost missed it, beneath the hum of freezer fans. Grandpa, I thought you forgot me. I swear to God, the entire store disappeared for half a second. No music, no carts, no rain, nothing. Just that sentence hanging there between us. You know how sometimes pain doesn't arrive loud, Sometimes it arrives precise, like a nail sliding exactly between ribs. I crouch down carefully because my knees sound like microwave popcorn these days, and I looked at her face. Sophie's eyes were red around the edges. Not crying right then, but recently cried. There's a difference. Forgot you, I said softly. Sweetheart, what are you talking about? She twisted part of my jacket in her fist, the way she used to when she was little and tired. Mom said you didn't want to come see me anymore. There it was. Not an accident, not distance, not scheduling problems, a narrative. Now here's where experience matters. Most people hearing that would immediately react emotionally, raise their voice, chase the parent, demand answers in the middle of aisle 7 between canned beans and Pop-Tarts. But 30 years investigating family conflicts teaches you something important. The first person who loses emotional control usually loses the room. And Claire was already approaching us. Fast. She came around the corner pushing a shopping cart half full of groceries. Almond milk, frozen waffles, Capri Suns, one of those overpriced organic snack boxes parents buy to convince themselves goldfish crackers count as nutrition. Claire stopped dead when she saw Sophie wrapped around me. For just a second, her expression cracked. Fear. Not anger first. Fear. Then it disappeared behind that tight, controlled smile people use when they think appearances still matter. Sophie, she said sharply. Not loud. Worse. Controlled. Every child knows that tone. Sophie's arms tightened around me another inch before slowly letting go. That told me more than anything else. Claire walked closer, jaw tight enough I could see the muscle jumping near her ear. She looked exhausted, expensive beige sweater, hair pulled back too fast, dark circles under her eyes she'd tried covering with makeup. Grief had aged her, but something else had hardened her too. You can't just run off like that, Claire told Sophie, gripping the cart handle. Then finally she looked at me. Barely. You shouldn't confuse her. Now hold on. That sentence right there, that's not the sentence of somebody casually distancing from an in-law. That's strategic language. Confuse her. Not upset her. Not overwhelm her. Confuse. That's a word people use when they're trying to control a version of reality. I kept my voice calm. Claire, I haven't seen my granddaughter in almost 4 months. She's had a difficult year. We all have. Her eyes flicked away immediately. Another thing I noticed. People avoiding eye contact during emotional conversations doesn't always mean guilt. But paired with defensive wording, physical tension, and narrative framing, yeah, my old investigator brain was waking up whether I wanted it to or not. Sophie reached for my hand again. Tiny fingers. Claire saw it instantly. And there it was. Again, fear. Real fear. Not of me hurting Sophie, of losing control of the story. Say goodbye, Claire said. Not mean, not emotional, just cold, like somebody shutting a car door. Sophie looked up at me confused, already trying to calculate adult emotions no 7-year-old should have to manage. Bye, Pop-Pop. I smiled because children remember your face during painful moments. That matters. Hey, I said gently. I'm still right here, Peanut. Claire turned the cart immediately. No explanation, no argument, no discussion, She just walked away, and Sophie kept looking backward over her shoulder until they disappeared near produce. I stood there, holding a can of Hormel chili like a confused hostage negotiator. A teenage employee stocking soup nearby glanced at me awkwardly. "You okay, sir?" "Depends," I muttered. "You got bourbon in aisle 8? He laughed nervously. "I didn't. Not really. But I also didn't chase Claire into the parking lot. That's important. Stay with me here. Because people love dramatic confrontation in movies, but real manipulation rarely breaks under pressure. Usually, it adapts. If I'd exploded right there, Claire would have gotten exactly what she needed. Proof. A scene. Validation. Instead, I paid for my groceries at Register 4 while a cashier named Tammy Rhodes rang up my oatmeal cookies and asked if I still fixed old radios as a hobby. I smiled, made conversation, acted normal. Then I walked into the rain carrying a paper bag and the worst feeling I'd had since Ethan's funeral. By the time I got home, I already knew 2 things. First, Claire had been lying to Sophie for a long time. Second, she'd made one very serious mistake, because she forgot what I used to do for a living. So instead of yelling in a grocery store parking lot like an idiot, I went home, sat at my kitchen table, pulled out an old yellow legal pad, and started documenting everything. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was crying or anything dramatic like that. I'm not built for dramatic tears. I'm built for staring at a ceiling fan at 2:13 a.m., wondering when exactly things started slipping without me noticing. The legal pad sat on my kitchen table like it was waiting for instructions. Yellow paper, black ink, old habit. 30 years in Child Protective Services will do that to a man you stop trusting memory alone. Memory lies when it gets tired. Paper doesn't. So I wrote, 4:17 p.m., Ingalls Market Tunnel Road. Sophie ran toward me. Pop, pop. "I thought you forgot me." Claire Myers present. Controlled tone. Minimal eye contact. Immediate withdrawal of child. I underlined that last part twice. Then I stopped and just listened to the house. That's something nobody warns you about after loss and after change. You start hearing the absence of people more clearly than their presence used to be. Ethan's laugh used to echo in this kitchen when he came over for Sunday breakfast. Now it was just the refrigerator humming, like it had nothing better to do. At 6:42 a.m., I called Walt. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "You're calling early," he said. "Either you're dying or you finally figured out how to work your coffee machine without injuring yourself." I saw Sophie. That changed his tone immediately. "Where Ingalls? Tunnel Road. Yesterday." Silence. Then, and I told him everything. Walt didn't interrupt, which is how I knew it mattered. He usually interrupts me for sport. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. "That don't sound like nothing. Parker?" "No," I said. "It doesn't." "I hate when you say that," he replied. "That's your CPS voice." "It is my CPS voice." Walt made a sound like he was rubbing his forehead. "So what are you doing?" "I'm documenting," I said. "Of course you are," he muttered. Old man sees emotional crisis, immediately reaches for office supplies. I almost smiled. Almost. But then I looked at the legal pad again, and the smile didn't land, because something inside me had already shifted. This wasn't just about a misunderstanding. It had structure, and structure means intent. By mid-morning, I drove down to see Rebecca Sloan. Her office sits on College Street in downtown Asheville above a bakery that always smells like cinnamon and financial stability I will never achieve. Rebecca Sloan is the kind of lawyer who doesn't waste words because she charges for them. She looked at my notes without speaking for almost a full minute. Then she tapped the paper twice. "This is CPS documentation style," she said. "I know. You wrote this like you're building a case. I am not building anything yet." She looked up at me over her glasses. "Parker." That tone meant she was switching from lawyer to human being. What happened? So I told her about Ingalls Market, about aisle 7, about Sophie's voice, about Claire's wording. She leaned back slowly. "Confuse her," she repeated. "Yes. That's not normal phrasing in co-parenting disputes, I know." Rebecca closed the folder. "Parker, I think you're right to be concerned. That's lawyer language. For this is worse than you think. But I'm not ready to scare you yet." She slid the folder back toward me. "And I need you to understand something. If this becomes custody related, you cannot act like a grandfather. You have to act like a witness." "I know how to do my job," I said. She nodded once. "I believe you do." That was the moment I felt it fully. Not anger, not confusion, clarity. Because when someone confirms your instincts after you've already started suspecting them, it doesn't feel like relief. It feels like acceleration. By afternoon, Walt showed up at my house uninvited. He didn't knock, just walked in like he owned the place, which is illegal but emotionally accurate. He held up a paper bag. "I brought snacks," he said. "What kind? Emergency peanuts and emotional support cookies." That's not a category. It is now. We sat at my kitchen table. The legal pad was still there. Walt picked it up, flipped through it. "You're serious, he said quietly. "I'm always serious when children are involved." He nodded. Then he did something unexpected. He didn't joke. Instead, he leaned back and said, "You remember that CPS case you told me about? The one with the grandmother who tried to erase visitation records?" "Yes." "This feels like that." My stomach tightened slightly. "That case ended ugly." "I remember," Walt said. "You took that pretty hard." "I did my job," I replied. "Yeah," he said. "And you also didn't sleep for 3 weeks." That was accurate. We sat in silence for a while. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something about that afternoon made ignoring things feel dangerous. "Hello," a small voice. "Sophie." My entire body went still. "Pop, pop," she whispered. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, immediately lowering my voice. "Where are you, Mom's at the store." Pause. That was important. "Okay," I said gently. "You okay?" Silence on her end. Then, "Did you forget me?" My throat tightened. "No," I said. "I could never forget you." I heard her breathing. Then she said something that changed everything. "Mom says you're mad at us because of Daddy's money." Walt's head snapped up immediately. I stood up without realizing it. My free hand tightened around the edge of the counter. "Sophie," I said carefully, "listen to me. That's not true. But Mom said I need you to hear me." I interrupted softly, then slowed down. "Look at me. Okay. Even if I'm not there, I need you to remember something." Silence. I chose my words carefully. "I am never mad at you." Long pause. Then a tiny voice. Okay. Then the line went dead. Walt was already standing. That was not a casual comment, he said. No, I replied quietly. It wasn't. We looked at each other, and without saying it out loud, we both understood the same thing. This wasn't just emotional distancing anymore. This was narrative control. And someone was teaching a 7-year-old child how to believe it. I sat back down slowly. Walt watched me. You gonna call Rebecca? I already did. He nodded. And I looked at the legal pad again. At aisle 7. At Sophie's arms around my waist. At Claire's eyes, avoiding mine. I think I said slowly, we just moved from observation to action. Walt exhaled. Good, he said, because I hate watching you pretend you're not angry. I'm not angry. He raised an eyebrow. I'm just organized. That's the CPS voice again. Yeah, I admitted. It is. Outside the rain started again. But this time it didn't sound like weather. It sounded like something approaching. And for the first time since that grocery store, I stopped writing notes and started planning what came next. The first crack didn't come from a courtroom. It came from a mailbox, or more accurately, what wasn't in it anymore. I realized it on a Tuesday morning around 7:09 a.m., standing in my driveway with a half-empty mug of Maxwell House coffee and a stack of returned envelopes sitting on top of my truck's hood like rejected apologies. All of them had my handwriting. All of them had Sophie's name on them. All of them had been sent back. Return to sender. Address unknown. That line does something to a man. It doesn't just reject the letter. It rejects intention. I remember just standing there, coffee cooling in my hand, staring at that stack like it might rearrange itself into something less insulting. Walt showed up 20 minutes later without warning, which meant he had either sensed emotional instability or wanted breakfast. He leaned over my truck hood, squinted at the envelopes, and said, "Either you've been ghosted by the Postal Service or someone's playing dumb, Claire," I said. He didn't even hesitate. "Yeah," he replied. Claire. That was the first time we said her name like that. Not as family, as a problem. I brought the envelopes inside and laid them on my kitchen table next to the legal pad. The same table where Ethan used to sit when he came over with Sophie, tapping his coffee mug twice, before drinking like it was a ritual he never explained. I opened the first envelope again. Inside was a birthday card I had mailed 3 weeks earlier. Sophie's 7th birthday. I had picked it out myself at the Walgreens on Merriman Avenue. Pink glitter cover. A stupid little golden retriever holding balloons that said, "Happy Bark Day." Inside I had written, "Happy birthday, Peanut." Pop Pop loves you more than all the pancakes in North Carolina. I even included a $20 bill. Not because she needed it, because kids like feeling rich for 5 minutes. Now it came back with a postal stamp, like it had never mattered. Walt picked one up, turned it over. "Address is right," he said. "That's the point." "You're saying she refused them?" "I'm saying they never reached Sophie." Silence. Then Walt said something quieter than usual. "That's not just avoidance, Parker. I know." He looked at me. "You're thinking what I'm thinking." I nodded once. "Controlled isolation," I said. Walt exhaled through his nose. "That's your CPS brain talking again." "No, I said. That's my grandfather brain catching up. We didn't talk for a minute after that. Just sat there while the ceiling fan made its lazy circles above us, like it was indifferent to everything happening in my life. Later that afternoon, I drove to see someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Carol Bennett. She lived 2 streets behind Claire in a small beige house with wind chimes that sounded like broken optimism. Carol answered the door in socks and a cardigan, holding a ceramic mug that said, "World's okayest neighbor." "Parker," she said, surprised. "Everything all right?" "That depends," I replied. "Have you seen Sophie lately?" Her expression changed immediately. That's how you know you're asking the right question. People don't fake hesitation well. "She used to come outside a lot," Carol said slowly. "Ride her little scooter up and down the sidewalk. Real talkative kid. Used to..." She shifted her weight. "Not so much anymore. Claire keeps her in most of the time now." I didn't respond right away. Carol lowered her voice slightly. "I shouldn't say too much, but I've seen Sophie sitting by the front window sometimes, just watching." That sentence hit harder than I expected. Watching. Not playing, not going outside. Watching. I thanked her and left before she could see my face change too much. In the truck, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel longer than necessary. That's the thing about children. They don't understand legal strategies. They understand windows. Back at home, Rebecca Sloan called me at 5:48 p.m. I pulled something she said immediately. No greeting. That was her version of urgency. "What kind of something?" "There's movement on Ethan Meyer's trust account." I sat up straighter. "Define movement." "Claire has been requesting reimbursements," she said. "Educational expenses, medical, miscellaneous childcare. And the pattern is inconsistent. That's lawyer language for suspicious." She continued. "Parker, the trust was set up very clean. Ethan was meticulous. But some of these withdrawals don't align with Sophie's age or school records." My grip tightened on the phone. "How much?" A pause. "Approximately $184,000 over time," Rebecca said. The number didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how carefully it had been shaped. Not stolen in one motion, but drained in small legal-looking pieces. Death by paperwork. Rebecca's voice softened slightly. "There's more," she added. I closed my eyes. "Tell me." "Claire recently tried to modify the custodial oversight clause." There it was, the direction of the story. Control wasn't just emotional anymore. It was financial, structured, intentional. "I need copies," I said. "I already have them ready," Rebecca replied. "But Parker, I need you to understand something. If this goes to court, it won't just be about money." "I know. It will be about Sophie." That sentence settled in my chest like weight. After I hung up, Walt came over again that night. This time he brought no jokes. He just sat down at my table and said, "So what's the plan?" I tapped the legal pad. "Documentation first," I said, "then verification. Then we stop guessing." Walt nodded. "That sounds like CPS Parker." "It is." "And Grandfather Parker," I looked at him. "He's already tired of being quiet." That earned a small smile from him. "Good," Walt said. "Because quiet people don't win wars. They just postpone them." The next morning, something happened that I didn't expect. A voicemail from Sophie, Recorded by mistake on Claire's phone. Rebecca played it for me in her office. It was only 9 seconds long. But it was enough. Pop, pop. I still have the drawing I made you. Mom said I can't mail it yet. Then silence. Then background noise. Then the recording ended. Rebecca didn't speak for a moment. Neither did I. Because now it wasn't just suspicion. It was pattern. And patterns, in my line of work, always lead somewhere. Usually somewhere uncomfortable. I stood up slowly. Rebecca, I said, I want an emergency hearing request filed. She nodded, already reaching for her pen. And Parker, yeah. Her voice was calm but firm. Once we start this, there's no going halfway. I looked out her office window toward downtown Asheville. People walking, cars moving, normal life continuing like nothing was about to break. I wasn't planning on halfway, I said. And for the first time since aisle 7 at Ingalls Market, I stopped reacting to what Claire was doing and started preparing for what she would do next. Rebecca Sloan didn't waste time. By 9:03 the next morning, she already had the emergency filing drafted on her desk, highlighted in 3 different colors, like it was preparing for battle instead of court. That voicemail changed everything she said, sliding the papers toward me. I sat down slowly. Outside her office window, downtown Asheville looked normal coffee shop lines, delivery trucks, people arguing about parking spaces like their lives depended on it. Normal life is always loudest right before it gets interrupted. What does it change exactly? I asked. Rebecca tapped the document. It establishes intent of contact obstruction. It supports emotional interference. And it gives us standing to challenge custody conditions immediately. I nodded, but my attention was already elsewhere. Because somewhere between aisle 7 and this office, the story had stopped being about me being left out. It had become about Sophie being managed, controlled, shaped. And that's a very different kind of problem. Rebecca leaned back slightly. There's something else she said. I looked up. The trust account. She continued. Ethan Meyer's estate structure, it's not just being accessed. It's being slowly reclassified. That word made me pause. Reclassified. She nodded. As in, funds originally designated for Sophie's long-term trust are being labeled as short-term guardianship expenses. I felt something tighten in my chest. That's legal. It can be, she admitted, if the guardian has administrative authority, and Claire does. Exactly. Walt, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, pretending to read a pamphlet about fishing regulations, finally spoke. So she's not stealing it, he said slowly. She's reshaping it. Rebecca gave him a look. That's one way to put it. Walt shook his head. That's a polite way to put it. Nobody argued with that. On the drive home, I kept thinking about words. Confuse her. Return to sender. Reclassify. Sometimes manipulation doesn't feel like lies. It feels like paperwork. That afternoon, I drove past Claire's neighborhood on purpose. Not to confront her. Not yet. Just to observe. Old habit. The house was modest, 2-story beige siding, a little too clean, in that way that suggests someone is trying very hard to control what can be seen from the street. A small blue bicycle leaned against the porch railing. Sophie's size. Unused. I didn't get out of the truck. I just watched, and then I saw her. Sophie, standing behind the front window, motionless, holding something in her hands, a drawing maybe. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just looked. And even from that distance, I could tell something had shifted in her posture. Not fear, exactly. More like waiting. Like a child learning how to measure silence. Then Claire appeared behind her and gently pulled the curtain halfway shut. Not violently, not dramatically, just enough. Like closing a book you don't want someone else to read. That was the moment I stopped being unsure. I turned the truck around. That night, Walt came over again. He didn't knock, just walked in holding a plastic container of fried chicken from Publix and said, "I figured you hadn't eaten anything that qualifies as food." "I had coffee," I replied. "That's not food. That's emotional water." We sat at the kitchen table. Legal pad still there. Voicemail notes stacked beside it. Walt took a bite of chicken and looked at me. "So what's next, Parker?" I didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, I wasn't thinking like a grandfather. I was thinking like someone preparing a file that would end up in front of a judge. Next, I said, "Finally, we stop guessing what she's doing." Walt raised an eyebrow. "And start proving it." I nodded. "Exactly." The next morning, I met with a former colleague from CPS, Linda Carver. She owed me a favor from a case 15 years ago involving a custody dispute that went sideways in a trailer park off Swannanoa River Road. Linda still worked part-time consulting for child welfare audits. She looked at my notes, the voicemail transcript, and the trust summary Rebecca had provided. Then she leaned back in her chair and said something I didn't expect. "This is clean," she said. I frowned. Clean, as in structured. Whoever is managing this understands documentation systems. Walt let out a low whistle. "That's not good," he muttered. Linda continued. "But they made one mistake." I leaned forward. "What mistake?" She tapped the paper. "They underestimated who they were dealing with." That sentence landed harder than I expected, because for a moment, I realized something uncomfortable. Claire wasn't sloppy. She wasn't careless. She was confident. And confidence in people trying to control narratives is always the first crack before exposure. That evening, I got another call, unknown number again. I almost didn't answer, but something in me already knew. Sophie's a pause, then her voice, smaller than before. "Pop, Pop. Mom said I shouldn't call." My grip tightened. "Are you okay?" I asked. Silence. Then I think Mom is sad all the time now. I closed my eyes. That was the part nobody talks about in custody disputes. The child sees everything, even the parts adults think they're hiding. "Sophie," I said gently, "listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong, okay?" A sniff. "I drew you something." My throat tightened. "Yeah, I can't mail it yet." "I understand," I said carefully, "but I want you to know something important." Pause. "I'm still right here." Silence. Then the call ended again. But this time I didn't feel confusion. I felt direction. Rebecca filed the emergency hearing request the next morning. Judge Helen Mercer set it for the following week. Fast. Too fast for Claire to prepare properly if she didn't already suspect something was coming. And that's when I realized something else. She did suspect. Because the next morning, Claire called me. First time in months. I let it ring. Then again, finally I answered. Her voice was controlled. Too controlled. "Parker," she said. I didn't respond immediately. "I think we need to talk," she continued. I sat down at the kitchen table, legal pad in front of me, pen ready. "I agree," I said. A pause. Then she added something that confirmed everything I already knew. "Just don't make this harder than it has to be." And I almost smiled, because that was the moment she finally revealed it. She thought I was the one making it hard, not the one documenting it, not the one watching it unfold, not the one waiting for court. I looked at Walt across the room. He gave me a small nod, and I said quietly into the phone, "Claire, I already stopped making it hard." A pause. And then I added, "You just haven't realized it yet. The thing about people who think they're in control is that they usually get careless right before they lose it." Claire Bennett. Myers proved that theory on a Wednesday morning at 10:14 a.m. I remember the exact time because Rebecca texted me while I was standing in the hardware aisle at Lowe's staring at 2 different brands of duct tape like my life depended on it. Her message was short. She filed first. That was it. No explanation needed. I stood there for a moment holding a roll of industrial strength tape I didn't actually need, thinking about how predictable desperation becomes when it starts wearing legal clothing. By the time I got to Rebecca's office, she already had the filing in front of her. Claire's petition was confident. That's the best word for it. Too confident. She was requesting full modification of visitation terms, claiming emotional instability of paternal grandfather Parker Myers, along with documented patterns of interference in minor's psychological stability. I read it twice, then a third time. Walt leaned over my shoulder and muttered, "She really wrote psychological stability. That sounds like something you say before losing a custody case." Rebecca didn't laugh. That told me everything. "She's building a narrative," Rebecca said calmly. "Not a defense." I looked up. "What's the difference?" Rebecca tapped the paper. "A defense reacts to facts. A narrative tries to replace them." That sentence stuck with me, because I'd spent decades watching people confuse the two. Claire wasn't trying to prove I was dangerous. She was trying to make it feel believable enough that no one questioned it too hard. But she made one mistake. She didn't understand documentation. And she definitely didn't understand me. That afternoon, Walt and I went through everything again. Line by line. Legal pad entries, voicemail timestamps, returned envelopes, school absence notes Linda Carver helped us obtain. And then we found it. The inconsistency. A small one, almost invisible. Sophie's school records showed she had been marked absent. On 3 days, I was officially denied contact due to Claire's scheduling conflicts. But on 2 of those days, grocery receipts placed Claire at Ingalls Market at 3:40 p.m., meaning Sophie wasn't home because she was allegedly too sick for visitation, but Claire was shopping normally. Walt stared at the paper. "Well, that's inconvenient," he said. Rebecca corrected him immediately. "That's contradiction evidence." I exhaled slowly. This was the crack. Not emotional, not dramatic, structural, and structure always fails louder than feelings. The next call came from Sophie. But this time it wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. 7:02 p.m. Unknown number. I answered immediately. Pop, pop. Her voice sounded closer this time, less hesitant, more certain. Yes, sweetheart. There was background noise, television, a commercial for laundry detergent playing too loudly. I'm not supposed to call, she said. I know. Long pause. Then she asked something that hit me harder than anything Claire had ever done. Are you mad at Mom? I closed my eyes, because that question is where manipulation lives, not in lies, in emotional division. No, I said carefully. I'm not mad at your mom. A pause. But you're sad. I hesitated, because honesty matters more than comfort in moments like this. Yes, I admitted. I'm sad I don't get to see you right now. Silence. Then, softer, I miss pancakes. That almost broke me. Almost. I miss making them for you, I said. A small breath on the other end. Then the line went dead again. Walt was already watching me when I lowered the phone. She's isolating the kid, he said quietly. I know. That's textbook. I know. But what's she doing it for? He asked. That was the question that mattered. Rebecca answered it the next morning. We were sitting in her office when she slid another document across the desk. It was financial, trust account summary. And there it was, the pattern. Claire hadn't just been managing funds. She had been repositioning them. Slow withdrawals, small justifications, medical expenses that didn't align with any records, educational reimbursements for programs Sophie never attended, and then the sentence that changed everything. Pending custodial sole authority adjustment. I felt my stomach drop slightly. Rebecca watched my reaction carefully. She's preparing to become sole legal administrator of the trust. Walt let out a slow breath. So this ain't just family drama, he said. No, Rebecca replied. It's asset control. I leaned back in my chair. Everything suddenly clicked into place. The distance, the isolation, the narrative against me, the urgency in Claire's filings. It wasn't random. It wasn't emotional chaos. It was sequence. Claire wasn't reacting to grief. She was structuring independence from oversight. And Sophie was in the middle of it. That afternoon, I drove past Claire's house again. I didn't intend to stop, but I did. Sophie was in the yard. First time I'd seen her outside in weeks. She was sitting on the porch steps, drawing something in a notebook. Claire was inside. I could see her through the window pacing, phone in hand, talking fast, angry. Not at Sophie, at something else. Probably me. Probably Rebecca. Probably reality itself not cooperating. Sophie looked up, saw me, and froze. For a second I almost waved, but I didn't. Because Claire appeared behind the curtain immediately. And I saw it. The reflex, control response. She closed the blinds halfway. Not fully, just enough to shift the world back into her version of it. That night, Walt came over with something unusual. No jokes, no food, just a folded piece of paper. What's this? I asked. He handed it to me. It's from Sophie's school friend's mom, he said. I opened it. Inside was a note. Simple. One of the kids mentioned, Sophie says she can't talk about her grandpa anymore. Thought you should know. I sat down slowly. Because that's the moment things stop being theory and become pattern across environments. Rebecca called later that night. We're ready for court, she said. And I finally understood something important. Claire had tried to control the story, but she had made one fatal mistake. She assumed I was only reacting, not building. And tomorrow in Buncombe County Courthouse, she was going to find out what happens when someone like me stops reacting and starts presenting. The night before the hearing, I didn't sleep at all. Not because I was nervous in the way people usually mean it, not pacing, not panicking, just awake. The kind of awake where your mind stops asking questions and starts organizing answers you didn't even know you had. At 2:31 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table with every piece of paper laid out in front of me like a map. Returned birthday cards, school attendance records, bank summaries from Ethan's trust, Claire's petition filings. The voicemail from Sophie played once through my old flip phone, crackling slightly at the edges like it was afraid of being heard too clearly. I still have the drawing I made you. That line stayed with me. Walt called me at 3:07 a.m. Only Walt would think 3:07 a.m. is a reasonable time to check on someone's mental state. You awake, he asked. No, I said. I'm spiritually reorganizing paperwork. That sounds unhealthy. It's necessary. He paused. Then softer. You ready for tomorrow? I looked at the table. At Sophie's name written in my handwriting so many times, it started to blur together. I've been ready since aisle 7, I said. Walt didn't joke this time. Good, he replied. Because Claire's not walking into court thinking she's wrong. I know. She thinks she's safe, he added. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. That's the dangerous part, I said. The Buncombe County Courthouse doesn't look dramatic from the outside. That's the first trick. It looks like any government building in North Carolina, brick exterior American flag, slightly faded people walking in and out like their lives depend on small paperwork decisions. But inside, everything slows down. Air feels heavier. Voices drop lower. Even confidence changes shape. Rebecca met me at the entrance at 9:12 a.m. She looked sharp. Gray suit. Hair pulled back. Legal folder under her arm like a weapon she didn't need to explain. You good? She asked. I've been better, I said. That's not an answer. It's the most honest one I've got. Walt showed up behind us wearing a shirt that said, I'm not old. I'm classic, which felt like emotional armor more than clothing. I wore this for intimidation, he said. Is it working? I asked. Rebecca glanced at him. No, she said immediately. We walked in. Claire was already there. And I mean already there in the way people arrive early when they think timing gives them control. She wore a white blazer. Intentional. Clean. Calculated. Sophie was not with her. That detail mattered more than anything else in the room. Claire looked up when I entered. For half a second, something flickered across her face. Not fear, exactly. Recognition. Like she realized the story had arrived with its evidence attached. Judge Helen Mercer entered at 9:58 a.m. No theatrics, no build-up, just presence. She sat, adjusted her glasses, and said, "Let's begin." Claire's attorney spoke first. Predictable arguments, emotional instability, disruption of child routine, concerns about influence. Every sentence was structured like it had been rehearsed in front of a mirror. Then it was Claire's turn. She stood slowly. And when she spoke, I noticed something important. She didn't look at me, not once. "Mr. Myers has been inconsistent," she began. "Emotionally intrusive. He creates confusion for my daughter by inserting himself into situations where boundaries have been clearly set." Rebecca wrote something down beside me. Walt leaned slightly forward. Claire continued. "My daughter has expressed anxiety after interactions with him." That was the line, the one she needed. But she didn't know something important. In CPS work, we learned early statements without context are just air. Judge Mercer looked at her calmly. "Do you have documentation?" she asked. Claire nodded immediately. "Yes, Your Honor." That confidence again. Too fast. She handed over printed pages, photos, statements. I watched Rebecca scan them. Then I saw it. The slight shift in her expression. That meant something was off. Then Rebecca stood. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "we would like to submit counter evidence." And that's when the room changed. Because evidence doesn't raise its voice. It replaces it. Rebecca started with the returned mail, each envelope labeled, each date verified. Then school records, attendance gaps aligned with claimed sick days that overlapped with Claire's documented grocery store presence. Then bank records, trust account movements highlighted in clean columns. Claire's attorney leaned forward slightly. Then Rebecca did something I expected but still felt in my chest anyway. She played the voicemail. Sophie's voice filled the courtroom. Small, fragile. "I still have the drawing I made you." There was a silence after that felt like it expanded the room. Judge Mercer didn't move. She just listened. Then she asked, "Do you have anything else?" Rebecca nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." She looked at me. That was the signal. I stood up slowly. My knees made a sound I ignored. And I spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. "I'm not here to take anything from Claire Myers," I said. "I'm here because a 7-year-old child was taught to believe distance meant abandonment." Claire shifted slightly in her seat. I continued. "And because I spent 30 years investigating how children get lost inside adult decisions." The judge watched me closely. I placed my notes on the table, one by one. Not rushing, not performing, just laying out truth in order. "And I can tell you exactly when it started," I said. "Aisle 7, Ingalls Market, Tunnel Road, 4:17 p.m. Claire's breath caught slightly. I looked at her for the first time directly. "And I can tell you exactly what changed," I added, "when she stopped asking what Sophie needed and started deciding what Sophie was allowed to remember." Silence again. Then Judge Mercer spoke. "Counsel, I'm placing an immediate hold on trust disbursement pending review." That sentence hit the room like gravity shifting. Claire's face tightened. Not collapse, not breakdown, just realization. That's what losing control looks like when it arrives slowly enough for you to understand it. As we left the courthouse later, Walt exhaled heavily. "Well," he said. That went better than I expected, Rebecca corrected him. That went exactly as documented. Claire walked past us without speaking. But right before she left, she paused, looked at me, and for the first time there was no control in her expression, only exhaustion. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she said quietly. And I believed her. That's the part people don't like hearing, because intent doesn't erase impact. It just explains how people break things while trying to hold on to them. Outside, the air felt different, not fixed, not resolved, but opened. Walt stepped beside me. So what now, he asked. I looked toward the parking lot, toward whatever came after winning something that never really belonged in a courtroom in the first place. Now, I said slowly, we find out what Sophie needs, without anyone speaking for her anymore. And for the first time in a long time, silence didn't feel like loss. It felt like space. The courthouse win didn't feel like victory. It felt like the moment after a storm passes when you realize the roof is still leaking, just quieter now. Judge Mercer's order froze the trust account and mandated a supervised review of Sophie's living situation. But nobody in that room was naive enough to call it finished. Legal decisions don't heal children. They just stop the bleeding long enough for someone to figure out where the wound actually is. Walt drove me home in his old silver Toyota Tacoma, the one with a dashboard that rattles like it's arguing with itself. You okay? He asked as we pulled onto Brevard Road. I'm functional, I said. That's not what I asked. I stared out the window. Asheville passed by like nothing important had just happened. Coffee shops, cyclists, a guy walking a dog that looked more emotionally stable than most humans. I know. I don't feel like I won anything, I admitted. Walt nodded. That's because you didn't win, he said. You just stopped losing. That sentence sat in the truck longer than the engine noise. When I got home, I expected silence. Instead, I got a voicemail. Unknown number. I already knew who it was before I played it. Sophie. Pop, pop. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Not afraid exactly. Careful. That's worse. I went to court with Mom today, she said. Pause. They talked a lot. Another pause. Then the sentence that made my hand tighten around the phone. Mom cried after. Silence. Then the recording ended. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a child reporting emotional weather she was never supposed to interpret. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. The same table where everything had started. Walt came over an hour later without calling first. He looked at my face and immediately said, "That was her." I nodded. He pulled out a chair and sat down. "She knows you're still there," he said quietly. "That's not the problem," I replied. He waited. I looked at the legal pad still sitting on the table, now filled with dates, notes, patterns, and one simple truth I couldn't ignore anymore. "This isn't over," I said. Walt didn't argue. Because men like Walt don't argue when they know something is true. The next morning, Rebecca called at 8:06 a.m. "She's requested modification already," she said. I closed my eyes. "Claire." "Yes." "On what grounds?" Rebecca exhaled slightly. "She's claiming emotional distress due to court interference and requesting reduced supervision requirements." I rubbed my forehead. "So she's trying to regain control," I said. "Exactly." I stood up from the table. "Then we adjust," I said. Rebecca paused. "That's not how custody work normally goes, Parker." I know, I said, but normal stopped being useful a long time ago. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to Sophie's school, not inside, just parked across the street near Claxton Elementary. Red brick building, kids running on asphalt, teachers holding clipboards like referees in a game nobody fully understands. I didn't get out of the truck. I just watched. At 3:14 p.m., I saw her, Sophie, holding a pink backpack too big for her shoulders, walking slowly, not running, not skipping, just walking like she was measuring distance instead of enjoying it. She looked up, and for a second, I thought she saw me, but she didn't wave. She just hesitated, then kept walking toward a silver SUV where Claire was waiting. Claire got out quickly, too quickly. Open door. Controlled scan of surroundings. Hand on Sophie's shoulder immediately. Not aggressive. Not gentle either. Just possession disguised as protection. That's when I understood something I hadn't fully accepted before. Claire wasn't trying to hurt Sophie. She was trying to keep her safe inside a version of the world she understood. The problem is, control and safety can start looking identical from the inside. Walt met me later that evening at Little Pig's BBQ. He slid a plate toward me without asking what I wanted. "That's brisket," he said, "because you look like a man who needs something smoked and honest." I stared at the food. "You ever think she believes she's doing the right thing?" I asked. Walt didn't hesitate. "Every villain does," he said. "I don't think she's a villain," he nodded slowly. "Then she's just wrong in a very expensive way." That made me breathe out a short laugh I didn't expect. We ate in silence for a while. Then Rebecca called again. This time her tone was different. "Parker," she said, "we got something." I straightened. "What?" "A school counselor report." I felt my stomach tighten. Sophie spoke. "Yes," Rebecca said. "Not directly about you, but about structure at home." I closed my eyes. "Go on." She described rules about what to say and things that make mom upset if mentioned. Silence hit the line. Then Rebecca added softer. "She also said she misses pancakes." That one broke something in me I didn't expect. Because pancakes shouldn't be evidence. They should be mornings. I leaned back slowly. "What do we do now?" I asked. Rebecca didn't answer immediately. Then, "We prepare for the next hearing," she said. "And we focus on one thing, Sophie's voice, not Claire's version of it." After the call ended, I sat there for a long time. Walt watched me. "You're thinking too hard again," he said. "I'm trying not to miss anything," I replied. "You won't," he said. "That's your problem. You never miss things. You just carry them too long." That night I wrote something new in the legal pad. Not evidence, not dates, just one line. "Sophie is still trying to talk through the noise." And for the first time since this started, I realized something important. Winning wasn't going to be about exposing Claire. It was going to be about making sure Sophie could speak without translating her own childhood. And that meant the hardest part wasn't coming to court again. It was what came after, when everyone stopped talking and I had to figure out how to be just a grandfather again instead of a witness. The second hearing didn't feel like a continuation of the first one. It felt like the moment when a story stops being about accusations and starts being about consequences. Claire arrived earlier than anyone else. I noticed that immediately. Same white blazer, same controlled posture. But something had changed in the way she held her phone, like she was checking for stability that wasn't there anymore. Walt leaned toward me as we sat down. "She looks different," he muttered. "She looks tired," I said. "That's what I meant." Rebecca didn't speak much before the session. She just placed the updated file on the table in front of me and said, "Stay calm. Let the evidence do the talking." That phrase always sounds simple until you're the one sitting behind it. Judge Mercer entered at 9:57 a.m., same expression as before. No emotional shift, no anticipation. Just structure. "Proceed," she said. Claire's attorney spoke first again, but this time the confidence wasn't as clean. The arguments were still there. Emotional distress, instability claims, but they felt rehearsed in a room where someone had already moved the furniture. Then Rebecca stood, and everything changed. "We will begin with updated evidence of custodial interference and financial misrepresentation," she said calmly. She didn't look at Claire. She didn't need to. The first document was the school counselor report. Not dramatic, just clinical. Sophie Myers reports restricted communication regarding family members, expresses confusion over allowed topics of conversation, indicates emotional pressure to avoid certain subjects at home. The courtroom got quieter, not silent. Quieter. Then Rebecca played the next recording. Sophie's voicemail again. Short, still 9 seconds, still devastating in its simplicity. "I miss pancakes." That was it. No legal argument can compete with that kind of sentence because it isn't logic, it's absence. Claire shifted slightly in her seat. Not breaking yet, but close. Then Rebecca placed the financial timeline on the screen. Bank records, trust distributions, patterns highlighted in clean yellow blocks. Each withdrawal aligned with educational expenses that did not correspond to any school activity Sophie attended. Walt whispered under his breath, "That's not subtle." "It's never subtle when you see it all together," I replied quietly. Then came the returned mail evidence. Each envelope displayed, each date verified, each rejection stamp like a small repetition of the same decision. Judge Mercer leaned forward slightly. That was new. She was paying closer attention now. Then Claire's attorney tried to intervene. "Your Honor, these are interpretations." But Rebecca cut in, still calm. "We are not interpreting. We are presenting sequence." That word mattered. Sequence removes emotion from argument. It turns behavior into pattern. And patterns are hard to deny in court. Then Rebecca did something I didn't expect. She paused, looked directly at Claire for the first time, and said, "We also have testimony from the minor regarding behavioral restrictions in the home environment." Claire's head lifted sharply. That was the first crack. Judge Mercer raised a hand. "Is the child present?" Rebecca shook her head. "No, Your Honor. We are submitting counselor recorded statements." The judge nodded once. "Proceed." Then came the final piece. Rebecca turned to me slightly, and I knew. This was it. The moment everything had been building toward since aisle 7. I stood up, slowly, not dramatically, just deliberately. The room shifted slightly when I did. Not because I mattered more than anyone else, but because silence changes when someone who has been observing finally speaks. I looked at Judge Mercer, then at Claire, and I said, I'm not here to remove Sophie from her mother. A pause. I'm here because Sophie has been placed in the middle of decisions she was never supposed to understand. Claire's expression tightened. Not anger, not fear, something more complicated. Then I continued. I spent 30 years investigating how children become confused about who is allowed to love them. My voice stayed steady. And I can tell you exactly what that looks like. It looks like a child hesitating before speaking. It looks like a child asking permission to miss someone. Walt shifted beside me. I kept going. I didn't come here to win anything. I looked at Claire directly this time. I came here because silence has been doing too much talking in that house. The courtroom didn't move. Not a sound. Then Judge Mercer spoke. Mr. Myers, do you have a recommendation? That was the opening, not victory. Opportunity. I glanced at Rebecca. She nodded slightly. I turned back. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I recommend supervised reunification counseling and immediate neutral third-party custody monitoring. Claire's breath caught slightly. Not loud, but enough. Then Judge Mercer looked at Claire, and for the first time in the entire process, her voice softened slightly. Mrs. Myers, do you understand the concerns raised here? Claire opened her mouth, closed it, then finally said quietly, I was trying to protect her. That was the moment everything became real. Because I believed her, not fully, not completely, but enough to understand the part most people miss in these cases. No one thinks they are the villain while they're building control. Judge Mercer nodded slowly. I believe you believed that, she said. That distinction mattered. Then came the ruling. Temporary trust hold remains. Mandatory counseling for both parties. Structured supervised contact with Sophie reinstated under court observation. Not victory, not loss. Something in between. Controlled continuation. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different again. Walt exhaled heavily. Well, he said nobody exploded. That's not the standard, Rebecca replied. Walt nodded. Feels like it should be. Claire walked past us slowly. She stopped for a moment, looked at me, and for the first time there was no strategy in her face. Only exhaustion. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said again. I nodded. I believe that, I replied. She hesitated, then walked away. No final confrontation. No closure. Just distance again, but this time supervised by truth. Walt watched her go. She's not evil, he said quietly. No, I replied. She's just wrong in a way that hurt people. We stood there for a moment. Then Rebecca said something I didn't expect. This isn't the end, she said. It's the beginning of repair. And that stayed with me more than anything else that day. Because she was right. Winning wasn't the point. Sophie was. And we still had a long way to go before she stopped translating love into confusion. The first time I saw Sophie again after the court order, it wasn't in a courtroom. It was in a small, supervised visitation room at the Buncombe County Family Services Center on Merriman Avenue. White walls, beige carpet, a plastic table with rounded corners, like they were afraid even furniture might get emotional. Walt called it the least threatening room I've ever seen that still manages to feel like a hospital waiting area for feelings. He wasn't wrong. Rebecca met me outside the door. "This is not a reunion," she reminded me gently. "It's observation." "I know," I said, but I didn't. Not really. Because no one ever knows what it feels like until the door opens. Sophie walked in first. Small backpack, pink sneakers, hair slightly uneven like she had rushed brushing it that morning. She stopped when she saw me. Just stopped. Like her body needed a second to decide if I was real or remembered. Then she said it. Soft, careful. Pop, pop. And that was it. Everything I had been holding together since aisle 7 loosened slightly at the edges. I knelt down immediately. Careful with my knees, careful with my voice, careful with everything except my honesty. "Hey, Peanut," I said. She didn't run this time. She walked. Slow, measuring. Then she hugged me. Not like before. Not desperate. Not panicked. Just checking. Like she was confirming something she wasn't sure she was allowed to trust. "I brought pancakes," I said quietly, trying to lighten the air. A tiny pause. Then for the first time in months, she smiled. "Real ones." "Real ones," I said. "Not the kind that taste like cardboard optimism." That got a small laugh out of her. Walt, standing in the corner, whispered to Rebecca, "He's still got it." Rebecca replied, "He's just relieved. She's breathing normally." We sat at the table. No rush, no interrogation, just presence. Sophie looked at me carefully. "Mom said you weren't mad," she said. I shook my head. "I'm not mad at your mom," I said gently. "I never was." She studied me like she was checking if that answer matched what she had been taught. Then she asked the question that mattered most. "Are you going to stay?" That one hit harder than the court hearing. Because it wasn't legal. It wasn't procedural. It was emotional permanence. I chose my words carefully. "As long as I'm allowed to," I said. Sophie nodded slowly like she was filing that answer somewhere safe. The counselor entered quietly after that, observing from the side. No interruption, just supervision. Claire wasn't there. That mattered too. Not as absence, as space. After 20 minutes, Sophie started drawing at the table. A house, 2 stick figures, a big truck. She slid it toward me. "This is you," she said, pointing at the taller figure. "And this is me." Then she paused. "And Mom is in the house." I looked at it for a long time. Not because it was complicated, because it wasn't. It was simple truth drawn by a child who had spent too long trying to explain things adults kept overcomplicating. "You did good," I said softly. Sophie looked up. "Are we okay now?" That question doesn't have a legal answer, so I gave her the only one that mattered. "We're starting," I said. And for the first time, she didn't look away when I said it. Outside afterward, Walt handed me a coffee. "You survived," he said. "I didn't think I wouldn't," I replied. He nodded toward the building. "She'll need time," he said. "I know." "And Claire." I looked out toward the parking lot where Claire's car wasn't there. "She'll need more than time," I said quietly. Rebecca joined us a moment later. "Court requires continued counseling sessions," she said. "Structured co-parenting framework. and financial oversight remains in place. Walt exhaled. So basically, life under supervision. Rebecca nodded. Basically, accountability. We stood there for a moment. Then Walt said something quieter than usual. You know, Parker, you didn't fix everything. I know. But you stopped it from getting worse. I didn't answer immediately. Because that part mattered. Not victory. Interruption. On the drive home, I kept thinking about Sophie's drawing. 3 figures, house, truck. Space between them that wasn't empty anymore, just unfinished. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again. Same legal pad, but I didn't write evidence this time. I wrote something else. Sophie smiled today. That was it. Walt called later. She asleep? He asked. Yes. A pause. Then he said, You okay? I looked around my quiet house, at the coffee mug, at the empty chair across from me, at the absence that used to feel permanent. I think so, I said. For the first time in a while, I think so. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, good, because tomorrow you're probably going to overthink everything again. I almost laughed. Probably. After we hung up, I stayed at the table a little longer. Not because I was solving anything, but because, for once, I didn't need to. The truth was already out. The damage was already seen. And the repair had already started. Not in a courtroom, not in paperwork, but in a small room where a 7-year-old decided she still remembered how to smile. And that was enough for today. Outside, Asheville was quiet. Not perfect, not healed, just continuing. And sometimes that's the closest thing to peace you get. What I learned from all of this is something I wish I had understood earlier. People don't always fight because they are cruel. Sometimes they fight because they are afraid. And fear, when it isn't handled carefully, turns into control. And control, when it goes unchecked, turns into silence for the people who need to be heard the most. Sophie didn't need a courtroom victory. She needed to be allowed to exist without translating her feelings for adults who were too busy protecting their own versions of reality. And me, I learned that being quiet for too long doesn't make you patient. It just delays what needs to be said. So if this story meant something to you, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever been in a situation like this? We read every single one. And as always, thank you for being a part of this.